Okay. All right, Kelly, if you could just take a minute and let us know a little bit about you and your background and your current work experience.
Okay. Well, I graduated from IU in Bloomington in 2006, and I got my degree in applied health science. And then after that, to get an RD, you have to complete practice hours. So I did an internship through Ball State University, and I finished that in 2007, took my RD exam, and passed it. And I went to my initial job out of college was in acute care. I worked at a hospital. And in that hospital setting, it was a small community-based hospital. So I saw all of their inpatients, but then I also did a lot of outpatient counseling, and most of that was weight management, diabetes education, stuff like that. Following that, my husband and I moved to West Lafayette, Indiana, and that's where I got into long-term care, and I started working at nursing homes and doing menu planning, clinical, and then management through the nursing home there. After Greg finished vet school, we moved, and I went to work for WIC and focused mainly in prenatal, infant, and child nutrition. And I spent a couple of years there before going back to work in long-term care. I've recently actually quit my job and I started my own business. My business is called Complete Dietitian Solutions. And basically I do a little bit of everything. I do a lot of consulting for long-term care facilities, so still some nursing homes. And then I also provide education on a personal level. I do private consulting for weight loss, diabetes management, and that kind of stuff too. Basically, I do a little bit of everything nutrition related. I like to say that, we just provide nutrition solutions that are tailored to meet our client needs. So I do, private consulting, like I said, is really taking into account each person's individual lifestyle and how nutrition can work well for them.
Do you do online consulting for individuals who may not be in your area?
I have not yet. Like I said, I recently just started this business. It's new as of December. So
okay.
I'm still trying to get my feet wet with everything else without taking on too much at once.
Okay. So as a dietitian, if you're in the health world at all, whether that's exercise or diet, people always ask you your professional opinion on things. So what are some of the common questions that you get from the average Joe out there when they come up and they learn that you're an RD?
I've two, actually. The first one is, can you just make me a meal plan? Mm-hmm. And that for a lot of RDs is really frustrating. I think as soon as people find out somebody is a registered dietitian, that's the initial response that we typically get. And it's, we chuckle at it, but at the same time, it's kind of frustrating because when we make a meal plan, especially for somebody that we're doing private consulting for, it's very personalized to that one person. It's not something that we just, keep in our back pocket that we can whip out at any time. We base that personalized meal plan on their nutritional needs with considerations to their lifestyle, their activity level, medical conditions, and that kind of thing. So when people just come up and they're like, oh, you're an RD, can you just do this for me? It's, it kind of looks like they're making a lack of commitment, I guess. Mm-hmm. They're not willing to make the effort to actually learn the education and make those changes. They just want to be told what to do. So that's one of the big ones. The other one, of course, is, I want to lose weight. What do you think about X diet? And that's typically whatever the big fad is right now. Keto, it's currently keto. A couple years it was paleo. So it's kind of one of those things that, like I said, whatever the big fad is, that's the next question we always get.
So going off of that, what are your professional opinions on some of the more popular diets? So we can start with keto. What do you think of keto?
Well, all of them. Keto has its place. There have been studies done that show that keto has been very effective in reducing seizures in children with epilepsy. So I think it has its place, certainly, as any diet probably would. Any of those diets, though, keto, paleo, intermittent fasting, any of those, I don't like them for weight loss. Like I said, I don't want to completely discredit them because some of them do have their place. If you can use a diet to reduce seizures in children, that's awesome. That's such a great, application for it. But for weight loss, it's so indicative of us looking for a quick fix. And these diets offer that potential, especially if you look, at the sensationalized headlines that you see in the papers. Lose 10 pounds in a week with keto. that is, of course, very, very attractive for a lot of people. But these diets are so very restrictive that they're rarely sustainable. My other issue with them is that they promote a really bad relationship with food. And you see that because people have their cheat days,
Mm-hmm.
and things like that really invoke feelings of guilt and remorse when you have those cheat days, and people get down on themselves because of it. And then it puts in your mind that there's good foods and bad foods. And if you have those bad foods, you've cheated on your diet and you're not doing well. And it just doesn't promote a very good relationship with food. These diets can also be very socially isolating. I think a perfect example of that, Linda, you shared a video on your website a week or two ago, the guy that wants his friends to know he's on a diet. It's
Mm-hmm.
hilarious. It's funny because we all know that person. But he's at a friend's house looking for snacks, and his friends don't have anything to offer him because he's on this special diet. Same thing can be said about going out to eat at restaurants and that sort of thing. They're very socially isolating. And I guess my issue with them is if you're willing to make such drastic changes, why not make the right changes that'll be sustainable for your life and it fits into your lifestyle? So, generally speaking, any fad diet or any diet in general that cuts out entire groups of food, I just don't endorse, because all food groups have things that they can offer that are healthy for us. It's really about learning, sometimes foods versus everyday foods. And I know that tends to sound kind of juvenile, but I do have a background in child nutrition. So that kind of, hits home to a lot of people. If it's a sometimes food, it's okay to have sometimes. It's not an everyday food. It's not the choices that you make once or twice a month that are going to sabotage your diet and sabotage your weight loss plan or your health. It's the things that you do every day that make the biggest difference in your diet.
So with intermittent fasting, I have a lot of clients that ask me about that. And
Okay.
The claim is that it increases your metabolism. So from your education and experience, what would you say to that claim?
There have been some studies done recently that do support that, but there's also studies done that don't support it. One of the things that I would say, because there have been a number of studies done on fasting in general, people that tend to skip meals or people that fast or whatever, those people that tend to skip meals, when they do eat, they tend to overeat. So the claim can be made, yeah, it boosts your metabolism, but then if you overeat right after that, are you really saving anything?
Mm-hmm. So with, you mentioned relationships with food, something I have said a lot in the last couple of years, I think, that the problem with diets and the problem with the majority of individuals these days is that our relationship with food has been kind of destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
So when you work with individuals, what do you do, or how can you help them repair that relationship?
It's really difficult because it's really breaking down things that they have been taught or things that they have seen for many years, and in some cases their entire lives. If you're a child that grew up overweight and your parents were always on you about the things that you were eating, you're talking about a lifelong, learned behavior that some foods are good and some are bad. And it's really breaking down, like I said, as an RD, to do a weight loss plan or even a diabetes plan or anything like that for an individual, I take a diet history first, and then we look at what their nutritional needs are and how to fit it into their lifestyle using things that they're currently doing so that it's not such a drastic change. Sometimes it's as simple as, they're not eating breakfast every day and that's all we have to do. Sometimes it's more extreme where they don't eat all day long and then, it's a binge behavior at night. But it's really kind of going back and getting a history first to figure out what kind of relationship they have with food. And that helps identify things like skipping meals or binge eating or emotional eating and finding those triggers of why we eat. Are we internally motivated versus externally motivated when it comes to food? An example of that, I myself am internally motivated when it comes to meals. I can sleep till 10 o'clock in the morning, get up and eat breakfast, and at noon I feel like I have to eat lunch because it's noon, and that's when I eat lunch. So for me, it's a very internal motivator. It's set at a clock, and that's when I eat, and that's my pattern, and that's what I do, even though I'm not hungry because I just had breakfast an hour and a half before. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of one of those things, we have to figure out, and that's where a registered dietitian is so useful, because we'll get into that history and we'll look at what your lifestyle is and figure out how to make it work for you.
Yeah. And I feel like sometimes even with exercise is similar to nutrition in that you have to um, overcome all of these barriers and issues that they've faced. So it's even, you're going back years and years for some of these individuals and having to overcome these. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you obviously are very busy. You're a mother of 2 young children and a wife, and you have now your own business. So a lot of individuals tell me that they are too busy to eat quote unquote healthy. And I say healthy. I like the term nutritious better than healthy, because everybody defines healthy in a different way. I don't know what your opinion is on that.
Sure.
But when they say they're too busy to eat healthy, what things do you often say to individuals who tell you that?
It's not always easy. And it's not always going to be easy. Even when you've done it for a long time, there are going to be those days where it might just not work, and that's okay. And again, it goes back to what are you doing every day versus what is the abnormality, what happens once or twice a month because it happens to be, baseball tournament weekend and little Billy's got a tournament all weekend long and that you're traveling for. It's not the things that you do every now and then, it's the things that you do every day. I think the biggest thing is, how much of a priority is it for you? And it should, especially if you have a family, it should be a priority, because the things that you're doing are what you're teaching your children. For me, like you said, I've got 2 kids and they're little kids. I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. My husband is a veterinarian, so he works long hours and he works sometimes crazy hours. And then on top of that, I've started my own business, so our lives do get hectic. But it has to be a priority. And for me, planning makes all the difference in the world. And it doesn't even have to go so far as, spending your entire Sunday meal prepping for the entire week. But I take, half an hour on Sunday to plan a menu for the week. I figure out what our schedule is going to be for the week. What days am I going to need to cook? What days is it not going to be feasible? And then what can I do on those days to make sure that we get something good? Or maybe we do have to just go out for dinner, and that's okay too, because it doesn't happen that often. So when it does, even if it does happen often, there are choices that you can make in a restaurant that are nutritious, that are healthy. The trick is getting ourselves out of, well, this is a treat. If you're going out to eat 3 or 4 times a week, it's not a treat anymore, and that's your norm. So you have to plan for that. You can't get chicken strips and French fries every time you go out to eat at a restaurant if you're going out 3 nights a week, because that's not nutritious. Like I said, it's everyday foods versus sometimes foods. So planning in advance, figuring out what works for your lifestyle. If it's crock pot meals, that's great. If it's prepping in advance and doing that all day Sunday meal planning, that's great. Some people, like for some of the meals that I make, I'll make them bigger. So if we do like chili or we do soups or things like that, where we can easily make a big batch and it's no big deal, then I'll freeze half of it so that if I do need something quick, I've got that in the freezer. All I have to do is heat it up and we're ready to go. So again, it really goes into what fits your lifestyle. What are you going to use? The things that I do don't work for everybody. A good example of that is my in-laws never eat leftovers. So for them, freezing leftovers is not going to fit into their lifestyle because they don't like that. And that's okay. It doesn't work for everybody, but it's figuring out what works for you.
So what about then the argument that it's just too expensive to get the healthy foods at the grocery store?
I hate that this perception exists. It absolutely does. And it drives me crazy. And the reason for that, and I think part of what has perpetuated it, are these fad movements like organic and gluten-free and non-GMO. And those things that get so over-reported in the media have people scared to eat foods. There have been polls and studies that are done that have shown that people are more likely to skip buying fruits and vegetables altogether because they can't afford to buy organic or because they can't afford to buy GMO. And they don't understand, they hear these terms and these words in the news and they don't understand what they mean, so they just don't eat it. And so I think there needs to be more education done for these people so that they know that, organic doesn't have anything to do with nutrition. Organic is a farming term. It's how it's produced. It doesn't have anything to do with the nutritional value that the food has. And not everybody can afford to buy fresh all the time, especially in the wintertime. And that's okay too. Frozen vegetables and frozen fruits are fine to eat too, as are canned. You have to do what works for your lifestyle and what works for your budget. And it's better to eat canned vegetables and canned fruit than not eat them at all.
So,
and again, I think that too is where that menu planning really helps, because if you know what you're going to have for the meals for the week, when you go grocery shopping, you can create a list and it helps avoid those impulse buys. And then you won't end up buying extra foods that'll just spoil. So I think planning plays a big part in that as well.
Do you personally buy organic or non-GMO products?
No.
Okay. And that's because you don't view it as a necessity?
That is true. Organic has to do with how the food is cultivated, whether or not they use pesticides and that sort of thing. I know there's more that goes into it, and that's, I think, a different podcast entirely. Mm-hmm. But for me, no, I wash all of my fruits and vegetables regardless of how they're grown. There's no evidence that suggests that organic is nutritionally better than conventional. It has to do with again, how it's produced and the farming techniques that go into it. And there's a big push for everybody to go organic, but and the same thing with GMOs. There's this big push to go non-GMO, that people don't realize that because of genetically modified foods, we're able to cultivate a lot more foods, and food insecurity will eventually be a thing of the past because of that. These people that can't get to food and can't get meals, genetically modifying food so that we can produce more is going to be a big thing. And I think by just, saying that they're bad and nobody should have them and you can't eat them and all this kind of stuff, it's kind of like cutting off your nose in spite of your face. Like, they have a purpose, they serve a purpose, and there's no evidence that they're that they're not nutritious. There's no evidence that they're bad for you as far as that goes too. So no, I don't buy organic and I don't buy non-GMO.
Okay. So I often, when with my clients, they ask, like, kind of what you've mentioned previously, that you're not a fan of diets that cut out any food group or anything, mm-hmm. But which I completely agree with. And I often say the only times you shouldn't eat something is either if you're allergic to it, or I do know that there's individuals who can, because of the relationship with food, are incapable of ever having it in moderation. And, and that can be something like alcohol, but it can also be related to food. Is there anything that you say no to 100% of the time, or is it always moderation?
Always in moderation. I never say no to any food, and I would never ask anybody to say no to any food. Again, it's developing that good relationship with food. When foods are viewed as bad or off limits, it often creates feelings of guilt when we consume them. And again, it's going back to those sometimes foods and everyday foods. Mm-hmm. And then again, figuring out what works for you. I read an article one time that defined people as eliminators or moderators. An eliminator is basically somebody that doesn't have the willpower to just eat a little and stop. So for them, they can't have that food in their house. And that, I think alcohol would be a good example of that. If you can't just have a drink, then you just can't have that in your house. And the same thing with any kind of food. A moderator is somebody that is not happy if a food is off limits, that they can eat a little bit of it and be satisfied. So again, figuring out which type you are. Are you an eliminator? Are you a moderator? And again, it's sometimes foods versus everyday foods. It's okay to have those things that we like and that, we can indulge in, because that makes us happy and there's nothing wrong with that. But if it's something that you're doing every day and it's not healthy for you, now we're talking about something entirely different.
So we've kind of touched on this a little bit with the whole relationship people have with food. But right now we're living in this world where the majority of individuals are either overweight and or obese, then are not. So, I'm not going to try to have you solve a world problem, but in your professional opinion, what do you think could be done to assist with this, or even, start a reverse in the trend?
A few things. From a personal standpoint, and not me personally, but people in general, I think from a personal standpoint, we need to take responsibility for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We need to stop looking for those quick fixes and the easy way out, a magic pill that's just going to melt the fat off of us. We have to stop making excuses for why we can't change it and just do it. Kind of going back to there's no time, we can't afford it. When really the reason is that we just don't want to put in the effort. So taking that responsibility on ourselves and saying, hey, it's time to go. We have to make these changes and move forward. But then still we start taking that responsibility, we can't move forward. I think there's also a big misconception about dieting. I think a lot of people think when they go on a diet, they have to give up all their favorite things. And that's just not the case. And it goes back to, are you a moderator or an eliminator?
Mm-hmm.
From a bigger picture standpoint, I think there needs to be a bigger focus on preventative care. I think that needs to be more readily available.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that there needs to be regulations put in place that protect the public from pseudoscience. There's so much information out there and so much of it is just wrong, and I think that having regulations in place that protect the public from stuff like that and from people that perpetuate this propaganda, basically, I think it would be a big push towards that. If you're giving out medical or health information of any kind, you should be licensed to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Too many people get on Google and do a search and feel like they know what's going on. And not to get totally off topic, but the anti-vaccine movement is part of that. Naturopaths are growing at an alarming rate. There was a 13-year-old boy in California just a couple weeks ago that died because his mother took him to an herbalist and he convinced her that he could cure her son's type 1 diabetes. So she quit giving him insulin. Things like that are just wrong, and it's scary. And I think there needs to be regulations in place that protects people from that. I also think that public figures should have to disclose conflicts of interest up front if they're promoting a product. I think that's another really big one. A lot of people have said that they get a lot of their information from social media. So I think those people that are on social media and pushing these products should have to disclose if they're paid to do so. Perfect examples are things like people like Kim Kardashian, and not that I am a fan by any means, please. But, she pushed a lollipop appetite suppressant, things like that. Like, she didn't disclose that she was getting paid to do so. Of course she is. But a lollipop appetite suppressant is clearly marketed to a very young generation of people. Dr. Oz is another one. Over 75% of the products that he endorses on his show pay for advertising during his show, but he doesn't disclose that he's getting paid to do that. So I think that has to be something that is put out there so the public know why they're pushing these products. It's not necessarily because they're good products, they're getting paid to do so. And I think there needs to be regulations in place that protect people from that.
Mm-hmm. What are your opinions? Because you mentioned Dr. Oz, and he's a big vitamin supplement pusher. What are your opinions on vitamins or supplements? Because I have some clients who do diets that totally take out a food group. So they're not getting all the vitamins and minerals and nutrients they need. So they say, well, I'll just take a supplement, and I try to educate them elsewise. But what is your opinion on doing that?
In general, unless there is a true deficiency, you really don't get any benefits out of taking vitamins or supplements of any kind. And when we're talking about supplements, I guess I'm talking about, like a multivitamin or vitamin E or A or what, just something specific. The reason I have to clarify that is because I do use like calorie and protein supplements for like malnutrition, something like an Ensure or a Boost. And I use that mostly in long-term care, which is totally different.
Yeah.
But what we're talking about in terms of diet and cutting out those food groups, so taking a vitamin to replace it, the problem with that, like I said, first of all, unless there's a true deficiency, you're really not getting the benefit of that vitamin, and you're just excreting it in your urine. So you truly are just pissing away your money. The other side to that is that there's not even if there's not a deficiency, vitamins of any kind are man-made. And because of that, they are not as easily absorbed as they are if they're naturally occurring. And as a result, that's why you don't see that benefit, because, and why I say you're just pissing it away, because your body can't absorb it. The only vitamin that your body absorbs better as a man-made vitamin is folic acid. That's the only one that is absorbed better synthetically than as it occurs naturally as folate in foods. So I don't recommend them, like I said, unless there is a true vitamin deficiency. You really don't get any benefit out of them.
What about for men, especially, and protein powder and protein supplements?
So protein needs are based on body weight. And I know a lot of men will do protein supplements because they feel like it helps them build muscle and all that kind of stuff. The typical American diet, though, is actually very high in protein. And most people, and I say most people because I do work with a lot of elderly that, you know, as taste changes when they get older, they don't eat as much meat. But the typical person that is, you know, healthy young individual that, you know, eats 3 meals a day, works out, all that kind of stuff. The typical American person gets plenty of protein in their diet and they don't need that protein supplement.
Okay. So I mentioned this in passing, but what do you think, what does the term healthy mean to you?
For me, it's about how I feel. And how do you feel? Are you capable of doing the things that you want to do? Again, a perfect example, I've got 2 young kids. I'm able to keep up with my kids. I'm able to make sure that they have everything that they need for the day. I get by with enough sleep. I'm happy with how I eat. You know, and like I said, I'm able to keep up with them. Like if they're 2 and 4, they're all over the place all of the time. You know, and it's not, you know, it's not where, you know, we go to the park and I have to sit, you know, mommy doesn't have to sit and take a break. I'm okay to play with my kids. So it's figuring out, again, how do you feel? Are you able to do the things that you want to do? And, you know, if you have young children, especially, or if you have kids at any age, are you happy with the things that you're teaching them? You know, are you comfortable with them going away to college and taking the things that they've learned from you? Or are you okay with them going to college and eating pizza every night for supper? You know, what are you teaching your kids, and are you okay with them taking that and living on their own with it?
So do you ever apply that term to foods?
In terms of healthy foods?
Yeah.
I do. And it's more just because, you know, I like what you said about, you know, calling it nutritious meals as opposed to healthy meals. I think that that's a very good way to look at it. I guess old habits die hard. You know, everybody says healthy. And so it's hard not to say that just because that's how everybody relates to it. And I think, you know, like I said, I don't think it's right or it's wrong. But yeah, I do tend to say, you know, oh, we had a healthy meal last night. You know, not that they're not all healthy, but some are just better than others.
So what's your favorite healthy meal to make for you and your family?
Anything that's quick and easy and not very messy. You know, like I said, I've got 2 young kids. They're all over the place. I don't want to spend all of my time in the kitchen. So I like something that's quick to prepare. I like something that's not going to make a lot of dishes and make a big mess that we have to clean up afterwards. And it's beneficial if it's, you know, ingredients that I have on hand.
Yeah.
One thing that comes to mind, though, in the summer times we make, it's called avocado caprese chicken. And again, I think it's more about the relationship that this particular meal invokes for me, as opposed to the food itself. But again, it's super easy. So we just get chicken breast, Greg grills it, we season it with garlic powder, onion powder, Italian seasoning, salt and pepper. And he grills it, and he's great on the grill. He's just fantastic. We pick tomatoes and basil from our garden because we always plant basil with our tomatoes. Again, it's a summertime meal. So when the chicken's done, he tops it with some fresh mozzarella. We put avocado on it and then the tomato from our garden. And once that cheese is melted, we take it off and drizzle it with like a balsamic glaze and fresh basil. And then it's such a beautiful dish to look at. But then we live on a lake. We take this dish and we eat it on our deck that overlooks the lake. And it's just, like I said, that's the memory that I have of this dish. We always eat it out on the deck with the kids. You know, the kids come out to the garden, they help me pick the tomatoes and the basil. So it's a family thing. It's a memory and it's an event. And that's the kind of relationship that we have to promote with food. It's, you know, it's not just about giving your body the sustenance that it needs, but developing these memories and this good relationship with food. And, we sit and we enjoy the summer weather out on our deck overlooking the lake, and it's a family meal together. That's probably one of my favorite things to make. And it doesn't have anything to do with the meal itself.
I love that though. That's great.
Thank you.
I guess you kind of said it, but if you had to just give one piece of nutritional advice to everyone, what would it be?
So I picked two here, and it really is figuring out your relationship with food and how to make it better. Because I think just having a good relationship with food makes it easy to eat nutritiously and eat better. And not even better if you already eat well, then, just again, developing that good relationship with food so you enjoy it. The other thing that I always tell people, regardless of the kind of counseling that I'm doing, or if it's just Joe Schmo walking off the street, finding out that I'm an RD and he says, "What can you do for me?" Is always eat within an hour of getting up, and at least every 4 to 5 hours after that. If you are eating well-balanced, nutritious meals, well-balanced, nutritious snacks, and you're eating regularly, that is going to be the best thing that you can do for your health.
Awesome. Well, thank you for all of this information.
You're so welcome.
Don't hang up.
It's a lot. I'm sure I'm going to raise some controversy on my stance on organics and GMOs and all that kind of stuff. But
I like the idea of doing a future podcast.
Yeah, I think that would be really good.
I'm going to